Remember when every pub had a cloud of smoke hanging just below the ceiling, when bus rides left your coat smelling of tobacco, and when a packet of cigarettes said as much about you as the shoes on your feet? In Britain, smoking was never just a habit. It was stitched into our culture, woven through wartime rations, working-class routines, and even the jingles that played on the telly. Today, we're taking a step back into that world, not to glamorize it, but to remember it as it was, by revisiting 10 cigarette brands that shaped generations and then vanished. Which ones do you or your family remember best? Share your stories below as we light up the memories together. Launched in 1965, Player's No. 6 quickly became the smoke of choice for the budget-conscious Brit. Its blue and white packet was instantly recognizable, and inside was a cigarette that struck the right balance, strong enough to satisfy, but smooth enough not to scare off first-timers. You'd see it everywhere, dangling from the lips of lorry drivers, tucked into the breast pocket of factory workers, or passed around behind the school bike sheds when someone nicked one from an uncle's pack. Part of its appeal was price. In the early 70s, you could buy a pack of 20 for around 20 to 25 pence, which made it accessible to just about everyone. But in 1978, new tax rules tied cigarette duty to retail price rather than weight. Overnight, the price gap between No. 6 and more premium brands like Benson and Hedges nearly disappeared. In a status-driven 80s Britain, many smokers upgraded, leaving No. 6 behind. Sales collapsed, and by 1993, the brand that once symbolized everyday Britain was gone. For those who remember it, No. 6 wasn't just a cigarette. It was a rite of passage, a working-class staple erased not by taste, but by policy. Camel wasn't born in Britain, but for a time it carried a certain mystique that set it apart from the packs stacked behind the counter. With its sandy-hued packet and the desert camel standing proud against pyramids, it whispered of jazz clubs, smoky basements, and an air of rebellion. In the UK, camels were rarely cheap or widely available, which only added to their allure. Artists, intellectuals, and those who wanted to signal they weren't like everyone else would light one up, choosing sophistication over routine. But that very exotic edge couldn't compete forever. As prices rose and homegrown brands stayed affordable, Camel slipped quietly out of everyday British life, leaving behind only its iconic image and the memory of a smoke that once made you feel worldly with every drag. Capstan Full Strength was a cigarette that didn't need advertising slogans to prove its point. You felt it from the first inhale. Unfiltered, heavy, and unapologetically harsh, it was the smoke of dockers, sailors, and miners, men whose lives were already carved by grit and sweat. A short, stubby stick of tobacco that hit your chest like a hammer, Capstan was less a pastime than a badge of toughness. For decades, especially in port cities and industrial towns, it was the cigarette that separated the men from the boys. But as the 1970s ushered in filters and health warnings, Capstan's brute strength became its weakness. New generations turned away from its rasping burn, and what once symbolized masculinity and resilience slowly faded into history. Still, for those who smoked it, Capstan remains unforgettable. An uncompromising smoke from an uncompromising time. Embassy was more than just a cigarette, it was a statement. By the 1960s, it had climbed to the very top of the market, boasting the famous slogan, "Inhale to your heart's content," and capturing nearly a quarter of Britain's smokers. What set it apart, though, was the coupon scheme. Every pack carried a little slip that could be saved and traded for kettles, radios, even bicycles. Suddenly, smoking wasn't just a habit, It was a lifestyle. Embassy Gold, with its polished red and gold pack, became the premium choice, tucked into handbags, coat pockets, and pub tables. But by the 80s and 90s, tastes shifted. Health campaigns grew louder, and the glamour faded. Still, anyone who remembers trading those coupons will tell you Embassy wasn't just a cigarette, it was a cultural event. Woodbine, launched in 1888, earned the nickname the poor man's cigarette, yet it became a symbol of grit and endurance. Cheap, strong, and unfiltered, it was the cigarette that followed British soldiers through both world wars, stuffed into rations and shared in muddy trenches. For working-class men back home, its harsh, tarry taste delivered a nicotine hit so strong it left fingers stained and lungs heavy. But it was dependable, always there, always cheap. By the post-war decades, a pack of Woodbines was as common on a pub table as a pint of bitter. But as filtered cigarettes gained ground in the 1980s and new health warnings hit, its reputation as a raw, punishing smoke pushed younger generations away. A filtered version briefly tried to modernize it, but it was never the same. For many, Woodbine remains the soldier's cigarette, a tough relic from a tougher time. Consulate arrived in the 1960s like a breath of fresh air, literally. Marketed with the slogan, "Cool as a mountain stream," it was Britain's introduction to menthol. And it quickly carved out a reputation as the cigarette for those who wanted something cleaner, smoother, and just a bit more stylish. The crisp white and green packet stood out against the earthier designs of its rivals, and its light, minty taste made it especially popular with women and new smokers who found brands like Woodbine or Capstan too harsh. For a while, it felt modern and even a little fashionable. But by the 1980s, the menthol craze had faded, and Consulate's edge dulled. The final nail came in 2020, when menthol cigarettes were banned in the UK altogether. Today, it survives only in memory, a curious reminder of the moment when smoking tried to rebrand itself as fresh and sophisticated. Craven A, launched in 1921, was once one of Britain's most recognizable cigarettes. With its bold red, black and white packaging, it carried a certain polish, especially in London and the south of England. Its defining promise was smoothness, sold under the famous line, "Will not affect your throat." In an age when health anxieties were growing, this was clever marketing, even if the irony now feels sharp. Smokers liked it that it felt less irritating than harsher, unfiltered brands, and the filter version only added to its reputation. For decades, it was a steady favorite, a touch more refined than the working man's smoke, but still widely accessible. By the late 1980s, though, Craven A had lost its foothold, overtaken by trendier rivals and fading from most shelves. For those who remember it, the pack still sparks nostalgia. An elegant design paired with a promise that history has since disproven.
Senior Service was never a cigarette for the faint-hearted. Launched in 1925, it was positioned as a premium unfiltered smoke, bold and uncompromising, the kind that hit the throat with a fiery burn and left no doubts about its strength. The branding leaned heavily on Royal Navy imagery, anchors, stripes, naval pride, which gave it an air of masculinity and duty. Expensive compared to everyday brands, it was often chosen by men who wanted a cigarette that carried both status and strength. For decades, it was a fixture in pubs and social clubs, a badge of pride for those who wanted to be seen smoking something with heft. But as filtered cigarettes became the norm and tastes shifted towards milder blends, Senior Service struggled to modernize. By the early 2000s, it was quietly discontinued. For many, its disappearance marked the end of an era when smoking was still a statement of toughness, not just a habit. Strand's story is one of the strangest in British tobacco history. Launched in 1959, it came with a moody advertising campaign showing a solitary man wandering London's empty streets, lighting up to the tagline, "You're never alone with a strand." Instead of reading as stylish or comforting, the public saw it as bleak and depressing. Sales never took off. At its peak, only about 0.3% of men and 0.7% of women bought a pack. The cigarette itself wasn't terrible, a medium-strength smoke in a sleek blue and white pack, but the damage was done. Within just a couple of years, Strand was pulled from shelves, remembered less for its flavor than for its catastrophic marketing failure. The slogan lived on as a cultural joke, a reminder of how badly an advert can backfire. Today, Strand survives not in memory of its smoke, but as a textbook case of how not to sell cigarettes.
Rothmans carved out a unique place in Britain's smoking culture, managing to walk the line between everyday accessibility and a touch of sophistication. Its blue and white packaging gave it a crisp, confident look, while the blend inside delivered a strong yet slightly sweet flavor that set it apart from harsher competitors. In the 60s through the 80s, Rothmans King Size was everywhere, sponsored sports events, filled pub ashtrays, and sat proudly on coffee tables. It was aspirational without being exclusive, the cigarette of the refined working man who wanted quality without drifting into elite territory. Priced just above budget brands like Player's No. 6, it felt like a small step up, a smoke that said you took yourself seriously. While the Rothmans name still exists today under new ownership, those who remember the old formula know it's not the same. The balance, the richness, the quiet confidence, it's gone. The pack may survive, but the spirit of Rothmans belongs firmly to another era. So there we have it, 10 cigarette brands that once defined Britain's social fabric, now vanished into memory. From the soldier's Woodbine to the sophistication of Rothmans, from Embassy's coupons to Strand's ill-fated adverts, each brand was more than just tobacco rolled in paper. They were cultural snapshots, reflecting who we were, what we valued, and how we lived. Smoking may have faded from the mainstream, but its role in shaping everyday rituals, identities, and even friendships is undeniable. Which one do you remember most? Your dad's brand, your granddad's, or perhaps your own first pack? Share your stories in the comments, because these memories live on not in smoke, but in the people who still recall them. The brands may be gone, but the echoes remain, lingering like a curl of smoke in the air, faint but unforgettable.